HOA sent a private patrol team to force their way onto my farm. My cousin, the sheriff, was sitting at my kitchen table. There is a certain kind of mistake that does not just backfire, it detonates. The kind made by someone so convinced of their own authority, so accustomed to getting their way, that they never stop to consider what happens when they are wrong. That is exactly what happened. The Thursday afternoon, Karen sent 4 men in black SUVs through my gate with bolt cutters. She had no idea my cousin was inside. I own 40 acres just outside a tightly controlled HOA neighborhood. A farmhouse, a few barns, open land, and enough distance from everyone else to actually hear silence in the morning. Wind, birds, nothing else. No HOA rules, no color-approved fences, no newsletters in the mailbox telling me what my property is supposed to look like. That was the entire point of buying it. My land borders the HOA neighborhood on one side. My property is not part of their association and never has been. I follow every county regulation that applies to me. Everything I do on my land is entirely within my legal rights. None of that mattered to Karen. Karen was the HOA president, and she treated that title the way some people treat a badge of actual authority. Clipboard in hand, complaints always ready. The kind of person who believes that if she repeats something confidently enough, it eventually becomes true. The problems started small, the way they always do. First, it was complaints about my farm equipment being visible from the edge of the neighborhood. Then, it was the smell. Apparently, people who chose to purchase homes next to a working farm were surprised to discover it functioned like one. I ignored most of it because there was nothing to enforce. My property was not subject to their rules, and every county complaint she filed went nowhere because I was not in violation of anything. That did not stop her. She started showing up uninvited at the edge of my property, taking photographs, writing notes, studying the land like she was documenting evidence of something. The first time I walked over and asked what she was doing, she told me she had received multiple complaints from people who chose to live next to a farm. I replied. Her lips tightened. She told me I needed to make adjustments. I said no. That single word seemed to offend her more than anything else I could have said. Over the following months, she tried everything available through official channels, letters, emails, county complaints. Every single one went nowhere because there was nothing to act on. But Karen did not want enforcement. She wanted control. And when she could not get it through legitimate means, she decided to manufacture her own. It was a Thursday afternoon. I remember specifically because it was one of the rare days I was not alone on the property. My cousin had driven out to spend a few hours away from work. He had the day off and wanted some quiet time. We were at the kitchen table with coffee, talking about nothing important, completely relaxed. Then I heard engines, multiple vehicles, moving fast, stopping hard near the front of the property. I stood up and walked to the window. 2 black SUVs with no official markings. 4 men climbing out wearing uniforms that looked like law enforcement but were not. Private security. I had never called them, never met them, never given anyone permission to send them. My cousin stood up beside me and looked out. Not expecting company, he said. Not even slightly, I told him. We watched them approach the front gate without slowing down, without calling out, without any attempt at contact. One of them went straight to the latch, found it locked, and stepped back. He looked at the man beside him and nodded. That was when I saw the bolt cutters come out. I felt everything in me go still in the way that happens when something is happening that should not be. We stepped outside together, moving across the yard as the first snap of metal cut through the afternoon air. They had already broken the lock, opened the gate, and were stepping onto my property by the time I called out. I asked them what they thought they were doing. The one in charge turned slightly and said they had been authorized to access the property. I asked who had authorized it. He said the HOA. I told him he was trespassing and needed to leave immediately. He shook his head and said they were there to conduct an inspection. My cousin stepped forward. He did not raise his voice, and he did not move quickly. He simply stepped into their line of sight with the kind of presence that changes the atmosphere of a situation before a single word is spoken. He told them they were not conducting any inspection. The man in charge looked at him properly for the first time, the way people do when they suddenly realize they have misread something important. He asked who my cousin was. My cousin reached into his jacket, produced his badge, and held it up without saying anything. Everything on that property stopped. The silence that followed arrived so fast it almost had weight. My cousin told them calmly what they had done. Broken a lock, entered private property without permission or legal authority, claimed authorization from a homeowners association, which carries no power to authorize entry onto land it does not govern. He told them there was no legal authority present in anything they had done, and that what they had committed was criminal trespass with potential additional charges depending on what the investigation produced. One of the men started to say they had been told. My cousin told him he was not interested in what they had been told. He was interested in what they had done. I already had my phone out. I told them the sheriff's office was on speed dial. That was when the confidence left the man in charge entirely, and something closer to genuine panic replaced it. Within 15 minutes, 2 patrol units arrived with lights running. The situation was immediately clear to every deputy who stepped out of those vehicles. A cut lock on the ground, an open gate for unauthorized men standing on private property, a county sheriff standing beside the owner with his badge visible. The 4 men were detained, questioned at length, and taken in. But the part that changed everything was what came next. Because once investigators began tracing who had hired them, who had briefed them, and who had signed off on sending them to a private farm with bolt cutters and instructions to enter regardless of whether anyone consented, every path led directly back to Karen. She had authorized it personally. She had described my farm as a nuisance requiring investigation, hired the private security company, and apparently believed that presenting it as an official action would make it function like one. She had not anticipated anyone questioning it. She had absolutely not anticipated a county sheriff being the first person those men encountered when they walked through the gate. The charges accumulated quickly: trespassing, destruction of private property, unauthorized enforcement actions on land outside any HOA jurisdiction. For Karen, personally, the charges included conspiracy and facilitation of criminal trespass. The HOA, as an organization, faced legal scrutiny, financial penalties, and significant internal fallout as residents began understanding how far their president had gone without their knowledge. I replaced the gate lock the following morning, heavier this time, with a reinforced latch and a chain that left no ambiguity about what the boundary meant. Not because I was worried about what came next, but because I wanted the line to be perfectly clear going forward. Karen stepped down shortly after. Whether it was voluntary or the board made the decision for her, I cannot say with certainty. Either way, she was gone, and the version of authority she had been exercising for years over everyone in her radius went with her. The farm is exactly the same as it was before any of this started. The equipment is still visible from the road. The The land still smells like working farmland, because that is what it is. The mornings are still quiet in the way that only open land produces. The only thing that is genuinely different is that no one comes through that gate without permission anymore. Not neighbors testing a boundary, not patrol teams with bolt cutters, not anyone. Because some lines only become permanent after someone crosses them in a way that cannot be undone. Karen crossed that line on a Thursday afternoon and discovered that authority borrowed from a clipboard dissolves the moment it meets authority that was actually earned. That is the part she never calculated. That is the part that detonated.